Hi, this is Alex, and this is Brewing with Power. I'm so excited to be talking about our topic today, which is a little bit off of the beaten path. Normally I brew a deck with you all, and I'm so excited about doing that. But today I wanted to take a little bit of time to talk about brewing and brewing strategies. And to illustrate some of my points, I'm going to be utilizing a deck that I have been so impressed with recently, and that is Crico. Crico is a mid-range mono black deck that was brewed by an amazing Chilean brewer named Cantrell, and I met him recently at MTG Vegas. When I first saw this deck, I didn't understand it because it has a lot of things in it that I don't see in a lot of decks. Before we get into today's video, I wanted to talk quickly about our sponsor, Moxfield.com. Moxfield is the best website for brewing and building your Magic the Gathering decks. It has tons of tools available that make building your new deck a breeze. Whether it be quick search, packages for quick adding of cards, multiple format support, and sorting options that fit your style, Moxfield is the best place to brew and build your MTG decks. Once you've built your deck, there are easy to use links to purchase your deck over at places like TCG Player to ensure you get great prices on the cards you purchase. We at Playing with Power use Moxfield for all of our decks. Once we discovered Moxfield and saw how easy it was to build decks, we brought all of our decks over to this system. It's free to sign up and free to use. Be sure to check out our link in the description and give Moxfield a try today. First, let's look at Crick. Crick is a 7 mana commander with 3 Phyrexian mana that you can use to cast him, which is really important because you can use 6 life or 2 life per black Phyrexian mana to help cast him faster. So he does cost 7, but you normally can cast him for 4. He has lifelink. For each black in a cost, you may pay 2 life rather than paying that mana. Whenever you cast a black spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Crick, Son of Yawgmoth. So really interesting. He's a horror minion, which is actually relevant. But I was really interested in how some of the lines worked with this deck. So when you look at competitive Magic right now, a lot of decks run 28 lands or 27 lands with a flip land and MFDSC, and that will be you'll be able to see that shortly, to help compensate for the high amount of free mana rocks that you can run in a deck and be able to power out what your strategy is rather quickly. You can have a very strong turn 1 or turn 2 and be able to maybe go for a win turn 1, turn 2 based on how many artifacts you might run that can give you mana at a very rapid pace. Is that correct? I'm not sure. Honestly, I'm not sure, because we have a lot of decks now that run under the same assumption that it's maybe 2018 or 2019, where these really fast strategies were so effective, right? But right now, at least, we're looking at the time, and it is the end of November 2021, and we're seeing stacks in mid-range really take the present stage. And I think with that idea, you can afford to slow down your game plan a little bit, as long as you're able to establish your board state and be able to grind or have some sort of way to slow everyone else down, which I think a lot of decks are currently doing. With Crick specifically, there's a couple things that I saw that are really interesting to me. One is the land base, right? We have 33 lands here, 16 swamps, but 33 lands. Oh my gosh, that's a lot of lands. This is 5 more lands than the average CEDH deck might have. Well, why would you have 33 lands in a deck like this? Well, Crick dies a lot. He's a 2/2 for 7, right? And when Crick dies, if you were to use rituals to power him out, you would not be able to cast him for a very long time. So the creator of this deck really wanted to make sure that if I'm able to cast Crick, let's say I have a Mana Crypt on turn 1. So land, Mana Crypt, pass, turn 2, land, let's say it's Ancient Tomb, land, you can then cast Crick. If Crick gets countered or dies, your turn 3, you can cast him if you play another land, right? So this is really important for this specific strategy. And also when you're looking at commanders that have a higher CMC, so maybe Kenrith or maybe Crom Tevish, or some of these like really high CMC commanders in the that have trouble if you power them out, but then they get countered or taken, and then you can't cast them again for a long time. Having the consistent land drops really make a big difference here. Another thing that I thought was really interesting about this deck is that it runs a lot of Pestilence effects. So it's on Pestilence Demon, it's on Pestilence, right? So if you were to look at Pestilence and Pestilence Demon, they both do something similar, right? So pay a black, do 1 damage to each player and each creature, right? So this effect is really, really good because you can continuously keep board wiping, and you don't necessarily have to, put 3 black mana or 3 mana into it to try and kill everything on the board. But, the fact that you can pump Crick with every black spell, it allows you to get more and more value as the game goes longer. And right now, at least, like I said, in November 2021, a lot of decks are commander focused. And that's what happens when you go into a stacks-less mid-range build. You need to have a lot of value from your commander. So you're seeing people becoming more and more reliant. Examples of this are Winota is a good example. You're super heavily reliant on your commander. Same things are going to be happening when you are running into Gitrog, or you're running into other like Tymna style decks where you need to be able to draw cards pretty quickly. These are all things that are heavily reliant on your commander, and being able to really board wipe consistently is going to be the running theme in this deck specifically. Another thing that we're looking at is understanding how important certain cards might be, or how overlooked they might become. In Crick, one of the cards that really stood out to me was Scourge Familiar. Man, that's a good card. Wow. This card is absolutely just a force to be reckoned with in Crick specifically, because you can just discard. Now, being able to discard and create mana and then do things with that mana is really, really important. But more than that, when you are looking at lines, and in this deck specifically, you're going to see cards that aren't in a lot of decks that are in this deck that you could run in other decks. So examples of this are Necrotic Ooze, which is run in some CEDH decks now, but Necrotic Ooze with Asmodeus and Scourge Familiar is absolutely bonkers. So if you have Scourge Familiar and Asmodeus in your graveyard with Necrotic Ooze, you can discard 3 cards to draw 7, and you don't have to pay a single life for it. This is a commander agnostic combo, which I think is really good and might be really, really valuable in other decks. I just don't see it. And that line is enabled by Buried Alive, which is just absolutely wonderful. So you can put all 3 cards into the graveyard, find a reanimation spell, reanimate your Necrotic Ooze, and go to town. So good. This deck is also on 16 artifacts. But the thing that I noticed when I was playing against this deck is that this deck can win more often than it should, but it can win through a lot of stacks effects. So let's say you have a Trinisphere, let's say you have a Torpor Orb, let's say there's a Stony Silence as well. Okay, because we're on so many lands, we can cast Crick, so Stony Silence won't hit us quite as hard. Because of Crick's ability, we can play through a Trinisphere, not necessarily having to pay the 3 mana per spell, because we can use our life to take care of the black mana, and that will count towards Trinisphere. That makes me really excited, because it says, oh wow, we can play through some of these pieces of hate that we see so commonly. Now, some of the cards that are just hard stops for this deck, Opposition Agent. That card is really, really rough on this deck. Same thing with Dothy Voidwalker or Arrest in Peace, right? But finding lines that can get through those are going to be really important. And like a good example, if there's a Dothy, a Dranith, and a let's say a Collector Oof, we can get rid of all those with Pestilence Demon or one of these Pestilence effects. So having the ability to continuously board wipe makes it even stronger. And when we're looking at brewing our decks, we should be looking at what are the biggest problems with our commander and how do we solve those problems. Add in the lines you want to add in, sure, but let's make sure we're addressing those problems so that you can navigate through sticky situations that are bound to happen, especially in a stacks or a mid-range meta. And then we see that currently. Earlier I mentioned that Crick, Son of Yawgmoth, is a horror minion. One of the things that we want to take into account when we're looking at horror minions is we have Cavern of Souls, but there are other horrors and minions in the deck, and when we're thinking about that, it becomes even stronger. So Chainer, really good, that is a minion. Okay, we keep looking through, we also see some other cards that are horrors or minions. I'm trying to see which ones they are. I think that's actually the only one. Okay, we can take that back then, that's fine. So yeah, so being a horror minion, so if we say minion, that we can get back our Chainer, which is really good to be able to cast it uncounterable. Okay, yeah, so that's just really a short idea that I wanted to talk about, because when we're looking at making decks, I want you to have more freedom in how you're not only crafting your decks, but what is considered competitive, because for a lot of people having 33 lands is way too many lands, and you would curse the day that you have 33 lands. But in decks that have high CMC commanders, especially in a Staxy mid-range meta, 33 lands seems pretty good. Having a land drop every turn seems powerful because you're always able to progress your board state no matter what. So yeah, take that as you will. I hope you enjoyed this. This is something that I hope that we can continue doing, but more than anything, I just want to make sure that when we're brewing decks, we're keeping new ideas out there and being able to have, open conversations about what is considered competitive. Again, this is the Kriko list by Cantrell. There's 2 other lists on the database that are also really, really strong, and I highly encourage you to check them out. But for now, I hope you enjoy this episode of Brewing with Power. This is Alex again, and I hope to see you next time.